I never expected to find a construction crew on my property when I came home from a 2-week business trip to Houston, but there they were, pouring concrete and hammering away at what looked like a small building right where my vegetable garden used to be. My name is Quentin Kowalski, and I had just spent 14 exhausting days closing a deal for the tech startup I work for in Phoenix, Arizona. The flight back had been delayed, my luggage got lost, and all I wanted was to collapse on my couch with a beer and forget about spreadsheets for a while. Instead, I pulled into my driveway in the Sunset Ridge subdivision at 3 in the afternoon to find 5 workers in hard hats completely destroying the northwest corner of my property. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, wondering if the Arizona heat had finally cooked my brain. But no, this was real. There was a cement mixer, piles of lumber, stacks of slate tiles, and what appeared to be the framing for a structure about the size of a 2-car garage going up on land that I definitely owned. I got out of my truck and walked over to the nearest worker, a guy in his 40s with a sunburned neck and a tool belt that looked like it weighed 30 pounds. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "What exactly are you building here?" He looked up from the level he was checking and wiped sweat from his forehead. "Pool house. Should be done in about 2 weeks if the inspections go smooth." "Pool house," I repeated slowly. "On whose authority?" He pulled a folded paper from his back pocket and handed it to me. "Got the work order right here. Says it's for the HOA president, lady named Brenda Whitmore." Of course it was Brenda. Brenda Whitmore had been the president of our homeowners association for 3 years, and in that time, she had made it her personal mission to micromanage every single aspect of life in Sunset Ridge. She had sent me violation notices for leaving my trash cans out 2 hours past collection time, for having a lawn that was a 1/4 inch too tall, and for parking my work truck in my own driveway because it had a company logo on the side. But this was a whole new level of insanity. "Let me see that," I said, taking the paper. Sure enough, there was a work order for a pool house, complete with dimensions, materials list, and a completion deadline. The address listed was 4247 Desert Bloom Lane, which was indeed my address. But the signature at the bottom was Brenda's, not mine. "There's a problem," I told the worker. "This is my property, and I never authorized this construction." His expression shifted from mild annoyance to concern. "You sure? Because we've been working on this for 3 days already." 3 days? My voice came out louder than I intended. "I've been gone for 2 weeks and nobody contacted me about any of this." Another worker, younger with a blonde ponytail sticking out from under her hard hat, walked over. "Is there an issue, Rick?" "This guy says he owns the property and didn't authorize the build," Rick said. She looked at me, then at the paperwork, then back at me. "You're Quentin Kowalski?" "That's right." "The work order says this is HOA-approved construction. We were told it was all cleared with the property owner." "Well, it wasn't," I said firmly. "I need you to stop work immediately until we get this sorted out." Rick shook his head. "We can't just stop. We've got a contract and a timeline. You need to take this up with whoever hired us." "Who hired you?" "Desert Sun Construction Management. They're the general contractor. We're just the framing crew." I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything: the construction, the workers, the work order, and especially the part of my property they were building on. Then I walked back to my truck and drove straight to Brenda Whitmore's house, which was only 4 streets over in the same subdivision. Brenda's house was exactly what you'd expect from someone like her: immaculate landscaping with flowers arranged in color-coordinated patterns, a fountain in the front yard that probably violated the same water usage rules she loved to cite at other people, and a Mercedes SUV in the driveway that cost more than I made in a year. I rang the doorbell and waited. Through the frosted glass panel beside the door, I could see a shape moving, and then Brenda opened the door with a smile that looked like it had been painted on. She was 52, with ash blonde hair styled in a bob that never seemed to move, even in wind. She wore white capris and a turquoise blouse, and her makeup looked like she was about to host a garden party. "Quentin," she said in that syrupy voice she used when she was pretending to be pleasant, "you're back from your trip. How was Houston?" "Why is there a construction crew building something on my property?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries entirely. Her smile didn't waver. "Oh, the pool house. Yes, that's all part of the new community enhancement initiative. Come in and I'll explain everything." I didn't want to go inside, but I needed answers, so I followed her into a living room that looked like it had been staged for a real estate photo shoot. Everything was white or cream or beige, and I was suddenly very aware of my wrinkled travel clothes and 2-week-old beard. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked. "Iced tea? Water?" "I want you to explain why you authorized construction on my property without my permission," I said. She settled onto a pristine white couch and gestured for me to sit across from her. I remained standing. "Well," she began, "as you know, our HOA bylaws give the board certain rights when it comes to community improvements. Section 14, subsection C specifically addresses shared amenity construction. That's for community spaces, Brenda, not private property. Your property borders the community pool," she said, as if explaining something to a child. "And we've been planning an upgrade to the pool area for over a year. The pool house will provide changing rooms, storage for pool equipment, and a small kitchenette for pool parties. It's going to increase everyone's property values." "On my land," I said, without asking me. "We sent out a notice about the project 6 months ago," she replied coolly. "It was in the HOA newsletter." "A notice isn't the same as permission, Brenda. You can't just build on someone else's property because you mentioned it in a newsletter." Her expression hardened slightly, the friendly mask slipping. "According to our bylaws, which you agreed to when you purchased your home, the HOA has easement rights for community improvements within 15 feet of any shared amenity." "The pool is on community property," I said. "My vegetable garden was on my private lot, well away from any easement." "I think you'll find that the property line is actually closer to the pool than you realize," Brenda said. "We had a surveyor come out and verify everything before we broke ground." "Then I want to see that survey, because I had my own survey done when I bought the house 3 years ago, and I know exactly where my property lines are." She stood up, her smile completely gone now. "Quentin, I understand you're upset, but this project is happening whether you like it or not. It's been approved by the HOA board, we've pulled all the necessary permits, and the construction is already underway. The best thing you can do is accept it gracefully and enjoy the benefits of having a beautiful new pool house that will serve the entire community." "Get it off my property, Brenda." "Or what?" she asked, her voice taking on a sharp edge. "You'll sue? Do you have any idea how expensive that would be? The HOA has legal resources specifically for dealing with obstinate homeowners. We can tie you up in court for years." I took a deep breath, reminding myself that losing my temper wouldn't help anything. "This conversation is over. I'm contacting a lawyer in the county. That construction stops now." "The county has already approved everything," she said smugly. "We have all the permits we need." "We'll see about that." I left her house and drove straight to the Maricopa County Planning and Development Office, which thankfully stayed open until 5 on Fridays. I walked in with my phone full of photos and a head full of rage, and asked to speak to someone about an unauthorized construction issue. After a 20-minute wait, I was directed to the desk of a tired-looking man in his 30s named Miguel Santos. He had a nameplate that said Building Inspector and a coffee mug that said, "I survived another meeting that should have been an email." "What can I help you with?" he asked. I explained the situation as clearly as I could, showing him the photos and the work order I'd taken pictures of. He listened carefully, typing notes into his computer. "So, your HOA president authorized construction on your private property without your consent?" he asked. That's right. "And you're saying the structure is being built outside of any HOA easement?" "Yes, I have a copy of my property survey at home. I can bring it in." He pulled up something on his computer and frowned. "I see a permit application for that address. It was approved 2 weeks ago." He clicked through a few more screens. "But there's something weird here. The permit application lists the property owner as the Sunset Ridge HOA, not you personally." "That's fraud," I said. "They don't own my property." Miguel's frown deepened. "Do you have your deed with you?" "Not on me, but I can get it." "Tell you what," he said, glancing at the clock. "I'm about done for the day, but this is concerning enough that I want to take a look. Give me your address again." I wrote it down for him. "I'll stop by on Monday morning first thing and do an inspection," he said. "If what you're telling me is accurate and they're building on your property without proper authorization, that permit is invalid, and the construction needs to stop immediately." "Can't you do something now? They're working right now." It's almost 5 on a Friday, he said. Even if I went out there today, I couldn't get the paperwork processed to issue a stop work order until Monday. But I promise you, I'll be there first thing Monday morning. Can you hold off until then? I wasn't happy about it, but I nodded. Monday morning. First thing, he confirmed, and bring that property survey if you can find it. I thanked him and left, feeling slightly better that at least someone in an official capacity was taking this seriously. When I got home, the construction crew was packing up for the day. The framing for the pool house was substantially complete, and I could see they'd poured a concrete foundation that extended at least 10 feet onto what I knew was my property. I spent the weekend fuming and digging through my files until I found the survey I'd had done when I bought the house. Just as I remembered, my property line was a good 30 feet from the community pool, and the location where they were building the pool house was entirely within my lot boundaries. Monday morning arrived, and I was up at 6, too anxious to sleep. I made coffee and waited, watching through my kitchen window as the construction crew arrived at 7. At 7:30, a white county truck pulled up, and Miguel Santos got out with a clipboard and a camera. I went outside to meet him. "Mr. Kowalski," he said, shaking my hand, "you bring that survey?" I handed him the folder with all my property documents. He spent a few minutes reviewing them, then pulled out a handheld GPS device and started walking the property line. I watched as he marked several points, checked his device, and took photos. The construction crew had stopped working and was watching nervously. Rick, the foreman, came over. "What's going on?" he asked. "County inspection," Miguel said without looking up. "Don't let me interrupt your morning." But Rick was smart enough to realize that work probably shouldn't continue until the inspector was done. He told his crew to take a break. Miguel spent about 40 minutes measuring, photographing, and checking documents. Finally, he came back to where I was standing. "The structure is definitely on your property," he said. "And based on the survey you provided, it's not within any HOA easement. The permit application lists the wrong property owner, which makes it invalid." "So what happens now?" I asked. "I'm going to red tag the construction, which means all work stops immediately pending resolution of the ownership issue." He pulled out a bright red tag and walked over to the framing of the pool house, attaching it prominently to one of the support beams. "This is a stop work order. No further construction can proceed until the permit issues are resolved." Rick looked like he wanted to argue, but Miguel cut him off. "This isn't negotiable. The permit was issued based on fraudulent information about property ownership. If you continue work, you'll be in violation of county ordinances, and your company can face serious fines." "We're just contractors," Rick protested. "We were hired to do a job." "Then you need to talk to whoever hired you and tell them the job is on hold," Miguel said. "I'll be filing a report with the Planning and Development Office, and they'll need to sort out the ownership issue before any work can continue." He turned to me. "You're going to want to get a lawyer involved. This is beyond a simple permit issue. If your HOA fraudulently claimed ownership of your property to obtain permits, that's a serious legal matter." I thanked him, and he drove off. The construction crew packed up their tools, with Rick making several heated phone calls that I could only hear snippets of. Within an hour, they were gone, leaving behind the half-built skeleton of a pool house with a bright red tag flapping in the morning breeze. I called my office and told them I needed to work from home for a few days while I dealt with a legal emergency. Then, I started searching for real estate attorneys in Phoenix who dealt with property disputes. The first lawyer I called couldn't take my case due to a conflict of interest. The second one wanted a $25,000 retainer, which was more than I could afford. The third one, a woman named Olivia Garrison, agreed to meet with me for a consultation that afternoon. Olivia's office was in a mid-rise building in downtown Phoenix with a view of the state capitol. She was in her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and sharp brown eyes that suggested she didn't miss much. I laid out the whole situation for her, showing her my property documents, the photos of the construction, and the work order with Brenda's signature. "This is pretty egregious," she said after reviewing everything. "Your HOA president essentially committed fraud by claiming to own your property on a permit application. The question is, what do you want to happen here?" "I want the structure removed from my property," I said, "and I want to make sure Brenda can't pull something like this again." Removal might be tricky if substantial work has already been completed, Olivia said. You'd likely have to sue for damages and force them to pay for demolition and restoration. But we can definitely file an injunction to prevent any further construction, and we can pursue action against both the HOA and Brenda personally for the fraudulent permit application. How much is this going to cost me? She leaned back in her chair. I can take this on a contingency basis if you're willing to pursue damages. HOAs have insurance, and in a case this clear-cut, we'd likely be able to recover your legal costs, plus compensation for the loss of use of your property, emotional distress, and punitive damages. I'd take 40% of any settlement or judgment. And if we lose? We won't lose, she said confidently. The facts are on your side. They built on your property without permission after fraudulently claiming ownership. This is about as straightforward as property disputes get. The only question is how much they'll have to pay you. I thought about it for about 30 seconds. Let's do it, she smiled. Great. I'll draw up the paperwork and file by the end of the week. In the meantime, don't talk to Brenda or anyone else from the HOA board without me present. If they contact you, refer them to my office. Over the next few days, things escalated quickly. Olivia filed an emergency injunction to prevent any further construction and sent a formal demand letter to the HOA board informing them that they had built on private property without authorization and demanding they remove the structure at their own expense. The HOA's response came 3 days later in the form of a letter from their attorney, a guy named Gerald Hutchins, who worked for a firm that specialized in HOA law. His letter was full of legal jargon, but the basic argument was that the HOA had acted within their rights under the community bylaws, and that I was overreacting to what was essentially a property line dispute. Olivia laughed when she read it. They're trying to frame this as a boundary disagreement when they literally filed for a permit claiming they owned your land. This is going to be fun. She filed a formal lawsuit against the Sunset Ridge HOA and Brenda Whitmore personally, seeking damages, attorney's fees, and an order requiring them to remove the structure and restore my property to its original condition. The lawsuit hit the HOA like a bomb. Within a week, I started receiving angry letters from other homeowners in the subdivision who were upset that I was suing our community organization. Someone left a note on my door calling me a traitor to Sunset Ridge. My mailbox was egged twice, but I also got support from unexpected places. My next-door neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Dorothy Chen, stopped by with homemade cookies and told me that Brenda had been overstepping her authority for years, and it was about time someone stood up to her. She tried to fine me $300 because my rose bushes were the wrong shade of pink, Dorothy said, shaking her head. I told her the HOA doesn't get to dictate what color my flowers bloom, and she threatened to put a lien on my house. Another neighbor, a young couple named Pete and Sarah Rodriguez, who lived 2 doors down, came by to tell me they'd had similar problems with Brenda making up rules and threatening legal action when people didn't comply. She sent us a violation notice for having a tricycle in our front yard, Sarah said. It was our daughter's tricycle and she was 3 years old. Brenda said it was an unauthorized vehicle. You should talk to my lawyer, I told them. If enough people have complaints against her, it might help establish a pattern of abuse of power. They agreed, and over the next few weeks, Olivia collected statements from more than a dozen homeowners who had been harassed, fined, or threatened by Brenda for various petty violations. The picture that emerged was of an HOA president who saw her role as a blank check to control every aspect of her neighbors' lives. Meanwhile, the legal battle ground on. Depositions were scheduled. Discovery requests went back and forth. Olivia subpoenaed the HOA's financial records and meeting minutes, and through it all, the red-tagged pool house sat on my property like a monument to bureaucratic overreach. 2 months after I filed the lawsuit, we got a break. During Brenda's deposition, Olivia asked her point blank whether she had reviewed the property survey before authorizing construction. I didn't need to review it, Brenda said, her voice dripping with condescension. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. I know where all the property lines are. So you didn't consult any official documents? Olivia pressed. I consulted with the HOA's site committee, and we all agreed that the location was appropriate. But you didn't verify the actual property boundaries? As I said, I know the neighborhood. And when you filled out the permit application that listed the HOA as the property owner, did you believe that to be accurate? There was a long pause. Brenda's lawyer, Gerald Hutchins, leaned over and whispered something to her. I believed the property fell within the HOA's easement rights, Brenda finally said. That's not what I asked, Olivia said. The permit application specifically asked who owns the property. You wrote Sunset Ridge HOA. Did you believe the HOA owned Mr. Kowalski's land? Another pause. The HOA has certain rights to community areas. Ms. Whitmore, please answer the question. Did you believe the HOA owned the property at 4247 Desert Bloom Lane? No, Brenda admitted, but I believed we had the right to build there under our bylaws. So you knowingly provided false information on a government document? Olivia asked. Gerald Hutchins jumped in. Don't answer that, we're taking a break. The deposition transcript was damning. Brenda had essentially admitted to lying on the permit application, which was exactly what Olivia needed to prove fraud. 3 weeks later, the county attorney's office contacted Olivia. They had reviewed the case file and the deposition transcript, and they were considering bringing criminal charges against Brenda for filing a false document with the county. This just got a lot more serious, Olivia told me over the phone. If the county presses charges, Brenda could face jail time. This isn't just a civil matter anymore. The news must have reached Brenda and the HOA board because the next day, Gerald Hutchins called Olivia to discuss settlement options. They want to settle, I asked when Olivia called to tell me. They want to settle, she confirmed. They're offering to remove the structure at their expense, pay for restoration of your property, and cover your legal fees. What about damages? They're offering $50,000 on top of the construction and legal costs. I thought about it. And Brenda? That's the sticking point. They want us to agree not to pursue criminal charges, but we can't make that promise since it's up to the county attorney, not us. I told them we'd consider a settlement if they agree to remove Brenda from the HOA board permanently. Will they go for that? I think so. The other board members are starting to realize that Brenda has created a massive liability for the HOA. Their insurance premiums are going to skyrocket because of this, and they're facing potential criminal exposure. They want her gone as much as we do. The settlement negotiations took another month. In the end, we agreed to the following terms. The HOA would pay for complete removal of the pool house structure, restoration of my property including new topsoil and landscaping, payment of all my legal fees, and $75,000 in damages. Brenda would resign from the HOA board immediately and be permanently barred from serving in any HOA leadership position in Sunset Ridge. And I would provide a statement to the county attorney acknowledging that the HOA had cooperated in resolving the matter, though I made no promises about criminal charges. The day they started demolishing the pool house was deeply satisfying. I took the day off work and watched as a crew tore down the framing, removed the foundation, and hauled everything away. Within 2 days, there was nothing left but a patch of bare dirt where my vegetable garden used to be. The restoration took longer. They brought in new soil, graded it properly, and even helped me rebuild raised beds for my garden. The landscaping crew they hired planted grass and put in a small irrigation system. By the time they were done, 6 weeks later, my yard looked better than it had before the whole nightmare started. The settlement check arrived in October. After Olivia took her percentage and I paid off various expenses related to the case, I cleared about $52,000. I put most of it into savings, but I used some to build a nice storage shed on my property, making absolutely sure it was well within my property lines and properly permitted. Brenda's resignation from the HOA board had been announced at a community meeting that I didn't attend, but Dorothy filled me in on the details. Apparently, Brenda had tried to give a speech about how she'd been unfairly targeted and how she'd only been trying to improve the community, but she'd been booed off the stage by angry homeowners who were tired of her antics. She's put the house up for sale, Dorothy told me over coffee one Saturday morning. Can't stand the shame of having to live here as a regular resident instead of the queen bee. Good, I said. I didn't feel guilty about it. Brenda had brought this on herself. The county attorney did end up filing charges against Brenda for providing false information on a government document. It was a misdemeanor charge, and she eventually pleaded guilty in exchange for probation, a fine, and community service. She also had to write a formal apology letter to me, which arrived in November and was exactly as insincere as you'd expect. The new HOA board was a refreshing change. They elected a retired engineer named Tom Fletcher as president, and his first order of business was to revise the bylaws to add oversight and accountability measures. No single board member could authorize major expenses without a vote. All violation notices had to be reviewed by at least 2 board members before being issued. And there was a new appeals process for homeowners who felt they'd been unfairly targeted. "We're trying to get back to what an HOA should be," Tom told me when he stopped by to introduce himself and apologize on behalf of the organization. "We maintain common areas, we plan community events, and we enforce reasonable rules that everyone agreed to. We don't build things on people's private property or act like petty dictators." I appreciated that. Life in Sunset Ridge slowly returned to normal. My vegetable garden came back better than ever. I grew tomatoes, peppers, zucchini, and herbs. Dorothy and I started a neighborhood gardening club, and several other residents joined in. We'd meet once a month to trade seeds and gardening tips, and it became one of the more popular community activities. The pool house project was eventually completed, but in the right location, on actual HOA property, properly permitted and approved by all the affected homeowners. It was smaller than Brenda's grandiose vision, but it was functional and legal, which is what mattered. I ran into Brenda one last time before she moved. It was at the grocery store in early December. We both reached for the last bag of decent-looking apples at the same time, and our hands touched. She looked at me with an expression that was equal parts anger and humiliation. "I hope you're happy," she said quietly. "You destroyed everything I built." "You destroyed it yourself, Brenda," I replied. "I just wanted you to stop building on my property." She grabbed the apples and walked away without another word. Her house sold in January and she moved to a condo in Scottsdale. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that the condo didn't have an HOA, which was probably for the best. As for me, I learned some valuable lessons from the whole experience. I learned that you have to stand up for your rights, even when it's expensive and stressful, and people think you're being difficult. I learned that most people want to do the right thing, but sometimes they need someone to push back against the bullies before they'll speak up. And I learned that even the most official-looking documents need to be questioned if something doesn't feel right. My property was mine again, fully and completely. The garden thrived. The new shed I'd built was perfect for storing tools and equipment, and the HOA, under new leadership, actually became a helpful organization instead of a source of constant stress. On a warm evening in March, almost exactly a year after I'd come home to find construction on my property, I was sitting in my backyard with a cold beer, watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in shades of orange and purple. Dorothy came over with a basket of fresh baked muffins, and we sat together in comfortable silence for a while. "You did a good thing," she said eventually, standing up to her. "A lot of people wanted to, but they were too afraid." "I was afraid too," I admitted, "but I was more angry than afraid." "Well, I'm glad you were," she smiled. "This neighborhood is better because you fought back." I raised my beer. "To better neighborhoods and less crazy HOA presidents." She clinked her coffee mug against my bottle. "I'll drink to that." The construction had started with a lie and ended with a red tag on day 1 of the county inspection. Everything that followed was just the slow process of justice working its way through the system, tearing down the lies and rebuilding something honest in their place. It wasn't quick and it wasn't easy, but in the end, it was worth it. My property was mine. My garden was growing. And somewhere in Scottsdale, Brenda Whitmore was learning to live without the power she'd abused for so long. The world kept turning, the desert sun kept shining, and life in Sunset Ridge kept getting better. I planted extra tomatoes that year, enough to share with all my neighbors. When they came by to pick vegetables from my garden, standing on the exact spot where Brenda had tried to build her illegal pool house, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was my land, hard-won and properly defended, and no HOA president would ever take it from me again. The legal system had worked, slowly but surely. The county inspector had done his job, red tagging the construction on that first Monday morning inspection. The lawyer had fought hard for my rights. The other homeowners had spoken up when it mattered. And in the end, the person who thought she could bend the rules to her will had learned that property rights and legal documents matter more than ego and ambition. I still live in Sunset Ridge. I still serve on the gardening club. I even joined the HOA board eventually, because I figured if I'd fought that hard to reform it, I should probably help make sure it stayed reformed. Tom Fletcher remained president for 2 years before retiring, and when he stepped down, the board asked me to consider taking over. I declined. I'd had enough of HOA drama to last a lifetime. Instead, I recommended Sarah Rodriguez, the young mother who'd been threatened with fines over her daughter's tricycle. She turned out to be a natural leader, fair and reasonable, and willing to listen to all sides before making decisions. The pool house, built in its proper location, became a popular gathering spot for community events. Kids' birthday parties, summer barbecues, book clubs, and board game nights all found a home there. It served its intended purpose of bringing the neighborhood together, just without the fraud and property theft that Brenda had thought were acceptable shortcuts. I never forgot what Miguel Santos, the county inspector, had told me that first day when he red-tagged the construction. He'd said that if your HOA fraudulently claimed ownership of your property, it was a serious legal matter that went beyond a simple permit issue. He'd been absolutely right. What started as an outrageous property grab turned into criminal charges, a lawsuit, a settlement, and ultimately a complete reorganization of our HOA's leadership and procedures. Every time I work in my garden now, I think about that moment when I pulled into my driveway and saw strangers building on my land. I think about how easy it would have been to just accept it, to let Brenda have her way because fighting back seemed too hard and too expensive. I think about all the other homeowners who'd been bullied and threatened but never fought back because they didn't know they could win. And I'm grateful that I had the anger, the stubbornness, and eventually the help I needed to stand up and say no. Because property rights matter. Truth matters. And nobody, no matter what title they hold or how long they've lived in a neighborhood, has the right to take what isn't theirs and claim it was all for the good of the community. The red tag that Miguel placed on that construction on day one of his inspection was more than just a piece of paper stopping illegal work. It was a symbol that there are rules, there are consequences, and there are people whose job it is to enforce those rules fairly. Without that red tag, without Miguel's willingness to investigate and act, I would have faced an uphill battle trying to prove my case. As I write this, sitting in my backyard on a pleasant April evening with my laptop balanced on my knees and fresh mint growing in the raised bed 3 feet away, I can honestly say that the whole nightmare turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me. Not because I enjoyed the stress or the legal fees or the months of uncertainty, but because it taught me that justice is possible if you're willing to fight for it. Brenda's pool house, the one she tried to build on my parcel, never made it past the framing stage before the county inspector red-tagged it on day one of his investigation. That red tag was the beginning of the end for Brenda's reign of terror over Sunset Ridge, and the beginning of my journey from frustrated homeowner to someone who understood his rights and wasn't afraid to defend them. The garden is thriving now, better than it ever was before. The tomatoes are heavy on the vine, the peppers are turning from green to red, and the herbs are fragrant in the evening air. This is my property, legally defended and properly restored. This is my home in a community that learned to value cooperation over control. And this is my story of how an HOA Karen's illegal construction project, red, tagged by a diligent county inspector on day one, ultimately made everything better by forcing us all to confront the difference between power and authority, between rules and rights, between a healthy community and a dictatorship wrapped in bylaws. I water the garden, check the progress of the zucchini, and plan what I'll plant in the fall. The sun sets over the Arizona desert, painting everything gold and crimson. Tomorrow I'll go to work, come home, maybe have dinner with Dorothy and some of the other neighbors. Life goes on, better and freer than it was before. And somewhere, filed away in the Maricopa County Records Office, there's a red-tagged permit with Brenda Whitmore's signature on it, permanent evidence that even HOA presidents have to follow the law. That red tag, placed on day one of the inspection, was the first domino that led to everything else falling exactly as it should. Justice delayed, is justice denied, they say. But sometimes justice arrives right on time, in the form of a county inspector with a clipboard and the authority to say, "This stops now." For that, and for everything that followed, I remain forever grateful.